Very, very fine musician, a very fine young man to play I Walk the Line. 1, 2.
The crazy 1950s made the world seem like a giant carnival where people were always working out the rides as they came along. At a time when ingenuity and eccentricity combined to keep people both smiling and scratching their brains, fashion, technology, and world events were all spinning quicker than a carnival ride. The year 1950, when the novel starts, saw significant changes in pop culture and politics. One side of the debate involved Chiang Kai-shek, who, following an unsatisfactory game of Take the Country, chose to establish an anti-communist government on the island of Taiwan, or Formosa as it was then called. It was similar to setting up a new board game after losing the last one, except this one included significant geopolitical risk and had global stakes. In the meantime, Israel's recently passed law of return served as a global jury's VIP pass to citizenship. When the eager immigrants arrived, they discovered UN-run Palestinian state with very limited budgets that would make a penny cry. For these Palestinians, the circumstances resembled a cruel joke rather than a fresh start. Television was creating its own headlines on the other side of the Atlantic. The number of TV sets in the United States increased from 1.5 million in 1950 to 15 million in 1951. People seemed to have recognized all of a sudden that staring at the family parrot was not the greatest source of amusement anymore. 85 million TVs were possessed by Americans in 1960. Even CBS experimented in color transmission, giving the impression that everything had recently been upgraded from black and white to full Technicolor.
If you can visualize 30 to 40 men in the studio all doing a job like this man is doing, you will perhaps get an idea of the complexities of the technical end of color television.
However, there was more going on than just the screen. The Diners Club card first appeared in the financial industry in 1950. Imagine not needing to carry a bunch of cash because you could make money appear with a magic card. Dining out became much less about counting pennies and more about swiping and signing thanks to this invention, which was the forerunner of the contemporary credit card. With the launch of the UNIVAC, the first commercial computer, in 1951, the tech world was buzzing.
Remington Rand makes 4 basic UNIVAC models. The general purpose UNIVAC, which you've seen tonight, UNIVAC Scientific, UNIVAC File Computer, UNIVAC Punched Card Computer. Each of them capable of literally hundreds of applications, from weather forecasting to complete business control.
So the introduction of a computer felt a bit like your neighborhood bakery suddenly selling upscale pizzas. The UNIVAC, the Nostradamus of computers without the enigmatic riddles, rose to renown when it correctly predicted the outcome of the 1952 presidential election.
And here he is in person, Alan Freed.
When Alan Freed first used the phrase rock and roll in the music industry, it was like to labeling a brand new dance sensation that quickly gained global popularity. Teenagers could finally escape the confines of their parents' music because to a cultural revolution that Freed's word helped to spark. It also reflected the rebellious attitude of the era. Across the ocean in 1952, England's King George VI passed away, transferring power to his young daughter, Queen Elizabeth II. Imagine a royal succession in which the incoming monarch is so youthful that it seems as though the adolescent next door is receiving the throne. Nobody could have predicted that Elizabeth would become the British monarch with the longest reign ever. Mother Teresa established the Calcutta Home for Dying Destitutes in India. Offering care and respect in their last moments, her purpose was similar to building a highly caring bed and breakfast for people who needed it most. After 3 years of arguing over who was right and who was wrong, the Korean War eventually came to an end in 1953. The 38th parallel was established as the border between North and South Korea, and an armistice was signed. The siblings' argument over the remote control persisted despite the ceasefire that ended the family feud.
President Truman responded bluntly, "We gotta stop these sons of bitches no matter what."
Also in 1953, people realized that cigarette smoking could cause lung cancer. It was like discovering your favorite candy was also a villain when you realized it. Once a sign of sophistication, the elegant cigarette suddenly turned into a health risk, and people all over the world started dancing slowly and awkwardly away from smoking. Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay both ascended Mount Everest in that same year. Their accomplishment was equivalent to asking, now that we've reached the highest point on Earth, what comes next? It was a victory of the human spirit, and it gave the rest of us the impression that we needed to consider climbing our own imaginary mountains. The United States launched the Nautilus, its first nuclear-powered submarine, in 1954. This undersea marvel could stay submerged indefinitely, making it the ideal "don't call me, I'll call you" vehicle of the sea. It represented the strength and reach of the nuclear era with a hint of Cold War drama. There was a period of societal unrest in 1955, when Rosa Parks in Montgomery, Alabama, refused to give up her bus seat. Martin Luther King Jr. organized a bus boycott. This act of rebellion caused ripples that would change the American civil rights movement, much like throwing a pebble into a pond. Sony released the first transistor radio in a pocket size in Japan. Radios used to be heavy and needed to be warmed up like a traditional oven before this. The ability to take your music about in your pocket seemed like a miracle to individuals accustomed to large, tube-powered radios. In the geopolitical arena, Egypt, Israel, Britain, and France were involved in the Suez Crisis as 1956 came to a close, everyone competing for a portion of the canal in a high-stakes game of risk. But in the end, the UN proclaimed the canal to be Egyptian territory. It served as a reminder that in the world of politics, sometimes the best move is to let someone else win.
Kids here have been expecting you to do something, so if you don't want to dance, sing. I know you can do that.
Okay, but then we cut out, right?
Right.
Come on, everybody, and snap your fingers now. Come on, everybody, and clap your hands real loud.
The 50s saw a steady evolution of the cultural landscape. Elvis Presley's swiveling hips on stage in 1956 were such a big deal that TV networks would frequently record him from the waist up in order to avoid controversy. Elvis Presley had such amazing dance moves that he almost had his own fan club. When you watched him, you would have thought that the king of rock and roll was attempting to change things up or perhaps spark a new dance fad. His performances made people wonder whether they had some rock and roll magic in their own hips, and transformed living rooms into dance floors. The Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the first man-made satellite, in 1957. This was the space age's equivalent of sending a giant "we're here" into the cosmos. Meanwhile, in the US, the baby boom peaked with 4.3 million births, making it a decade of new beginnings, if you could handle the cacophony of 1,000 baby cries. Women are now able to serve in the House of Lords in Britain. It was similar to saying, "Ladies, your seats are now ready," as you opened the doors to a big hall. It was a modest but important step in the direction of equal opportunities for men and women. In 1958, Europe took action by establishing the European Economic Community, EEC, equivalent to forming a superclub to rival the United States and the Soviet Union. Concurrently, the hula hoop craze was reaching its peak, emerging as the most funny and contagious toy trend of the decade. Every corner of the street was transformed into an impromptu dance floor, as people appeared to be pushing to become experts at keeping the hoop spinning around their waists. In 1959, Xerox introduced the first commercial photocopier, revolutionizing the way documents were duplicated. It was like a magic trick that turned one piece of paper into many with a press of a button. Fidel Castro established the first communist regime in the Western Hemisphere in Cuba, shaking up the political landscape and setting the stage for future tensions with the U.S.
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Finally, American Airlines ushered in the jet age with the first transcontinental flights using the Boeing 707. It was like putting the entire country on fast forward, making long-distance travel feel less like an epic journey and more like a quick hop across the country. So, as we look back at the 1950s, it's clear that this decade was a dazzling mix of innovation, drama, and quirky fun. Get ready. Next up is the 1960s, a decade set to turn everything up a notch. Think moon landings, revolutionary music, and cultural shifts that will reshape the world. The 60s are coming, and they're going to be a blast.
Oh, cool, and a jukebox.
Yeah, but since the songs are from the 50s, they're all about men in their 40s wanting to have sex with teenagers.
I wanna be Papa Teeny Papa at the sock hop, or maybe after work behind the mall shop.
13 candles is probably enough.
9, 10, 11-year-old, 12-year-old sex. I'm gonna sleep with all the kids tonight.
Joe, stop pressing buttons.